Hello, my name is Gupta, but you can call me Ron the Scope Crusher. Today, I want to talk to you about professional wrestling, specifically professional wrestling as a site of media convergence. Now, what does that exactly mean? If you think about it, professional wrestling is in itself a convergence between two different types of media, sport and theater. We see that sport aspect almost immediately as we see these wrestlers fight in the ring and display these magnificent feats of athleticism. But these wrestlers, they're not just athletes, they're also actors. Within these performances, they are displaying these unique personas. And I believe the integration, the convergence, the blurring of boundaries between athleticism and drama is what truly draws in fans of professional wrestling. Today, I want to dive deeper into that blurring of boundaries, and I want to analyze how that affects the form of professional wrestling as a form of entertainment. And I want to see how that changes how professional wrestling is presented to us, the audience. And in order to do that, I'm going to look into the evolution of professional wrestling. So to start, let's go back into that idea of convergence being a blur of boundaries. A specific text that does speak further into that topic is Carolyn Reinhardt and Christopher Olson's Convergent Wrestling. So within this text, Reinhardt specifically defines convergence as a blurring of distinctions between the methods of production and consumption of media. Now, within professional wrestling, we can automatically see who is the producer and who is the consumer. The producers would be the wrestlers, the people in the ring performing for the audience. And the audience is, well, the consumers. They're the one watching the ring. They're the one consuming this experience that is produced by the wrestlers. However, Reinhardt argues that convergence occurs when we blur the boundaries between the audience and the wrestlers in the ring. Specifically, she mentions the idea of kayfabe. Kayfabe is arguably the most important aspect of professional wrestling. It is a term for this engineered reality that the wrestlers display for the audience. It is a combination of their unique personas, their interactions with other wrestlers, and the storyline that accompanies the matches that they put on. Now, Reinhardt, she explains and she emphasizes that it is the audience that is the key to this convergence within professional wrestling, because it is the audience interaction that is key to co-creating the kayfabe of a wrestler. Now, let's dive deeper into what she means by this. The audience within the confined space of the ring and the ringside seats that the audience sit in, the audience is able to directly interact with these wrestlers. And within these interactions, they're able to inject experiences from not just other professional wrestling experiences, but also experiences from other types of media, movies, TV shows, video games, books. And as they're injecting these experiences, the wrestler does have this chance to take in these different experiences and build onto their persona, onto their kayfabe. So this is how we can see this convergence of media within professional wrestling. It is the audience that provides these experiences, and now it is the wrestlers that consume these experiences and thus build onto whatever persona they're building, and thus creating a cycle of production and consumption. And this is exactly what Reinhardt is trying to say. However, there is a bit of a caveat. The audience first has to believe in this persona. They have to believe in this kayfabe. They have to suspend their disbelief in order to fully engage into the professional wrestling experience and thus interact with the wrestlers. However, this affects professional wrestling because it should not be a burden for an audience in order to believe in whatever is going on in professional wrestling. This is how professional wrestling is how media convergence affects us, or affects the art of professional wrestling and how it's presented, because this changes the ultimate goal of the wrestler. They're not just putting on a performance, they're also promoting the suspension of disbelief within the audience. They want the audience to believe in this performance so that they can truly engage with the experience and thus create or co-create professional wrestling, as Reinhardt puts it. So the wrestler does also have an obligation in order to promote suspension of disbelief. Thus, this is what Reinhardt argues almost as a foundation of our initial question. So how does media convergence affect how professional wrestling is presented to us? Reinhardt essentially explains that the goal of wrestlers is changed so that they are promoting suspension of disbelief by incorporating other types of media and thus incentivizing the audience to engage with the performance. However, this is all assuming that professional wrestling only takes place within the ring and the seats that surround the ring. In this modern age, obviously that is not the case. We have large-scale wrestling events, namely the WWE, AEW, and other large-scale wrestling promotions. The problem with these large-scale promotions is that they have a larger proportion of audience members that cannot directly interact with the wrestlers. Within the same text, Convergent Wrestling, another author, Oliver Kroner, does mention this gap in Reinhardt's logic. Essentially, Kroner does mention that the WWE has to adapt to accommodate for this larger proportion of audience members that cannot engage with the wrestlers. Even though he does still maintain that Reinhardt is correct in the sense that audience interactivity is the key to media convergence and thus the proliferation of professional wrestling, but he also focuses on the different strategies that the WWE and other large-scale promotions does use in order to maximize audience interactivity and viewership. So he mentions that the WWE tries to build itself as a hybrid of different television dramas because it is a televised program. It can only make sense that the WWE borrows from these different genres of television in order to perform the same method of promotion and suspension of disbelief as mentioned earlier. By appealing to these different genres of television, the WWE can draw in more viewers. Now they also have the advantage of having this clear boundary between the audience and the ring. Even though it was mentioned earlier that convergence can be seen as the blurring of these boundaries, the WWE takes it in a different route. What they do is play with this boundary in such a way that it can play with the audience's emotions. It can make the world of professional wrestling seem like a completely unique experience. We have the special effects that can be edited into this televised program in order to make a wrestler seem almost supernatural, with the some examples being like Bray Wyatt, The Undertaker. But there is a problem with special effects almost drawing away or keeping audiences members disinterested in the program because now it seems a little more engineered or doctored. Now there is also the advantage of televised professional wrestling to have what is called long-form kayfabe. Long-form kayfabe. What this means is, since every episode of the performance is televised, we have longevity in the performance. The audience members can look back into these performances and thus follow the entire story of a wrestler from performance to performance. A wrestler is no longer just confined to one single performance to develop a storyline. since the audience members can engage with with these past performances, they now have the opportunity to build longer and more robust storylines with other wrestlers. And this is playing into that idea of the WWE being a hybridization of these different genres. They are playing into this idea of professional wrestling being almost like a soap opera by developing these robust storylines and thus having the audience members engage with the program on an emotional level. And thus, this is how Kroner is essentially explaining how the WWE and other large-scale productions are engaging with this goal of audience interactivity through media convergence. Instead of just incorporating these different aspects of different media into the wrestler's kayfabe, now they are playing into different genres of media like soap operas, horror, news, sports broadcasts, you name it. There's so much more inspiration that can be drawn in from by these large-scale televised programs because they have this boundary to play with, the television screen that the audience views the performance through. So here we can see a clear evolution on this idea of audience interactivity being integral to media convergence and its effect on professional wrestling and how it's presented to us. Now, with the arguments of these two authors, we can see that they're building off of each other, right? They are creating this evolution. They are displaying it to us to see how, as professional wrestling evolves, this goal of developing an experience where different types of media converge to increase viewership. Sorry if I'm rambling, but this is still a very interesting argument to me. They are building off each other as we see this evolution, and this is why I wanted to look into this evolution, because we see this goal as well evolve as well. Now, this is all still very primitive because we are in the age of what is called social media. Social media completely flips this idea of televised professional wrestling on its head, even though these authors are seemingly reaching a nuanced answer to the question initially posed. We see another author, Stanil Grozev, in his article, Professional Wrestling and Identity Construction in the Realm of Social Media. It's showing us a completely new perspective that forces us, the audience, to really reevaluate that argument that Kroner and Reinhard were initially presenting to us. Because social media complicates everything. This is a completely new medium where wrestling is displayed to the audience. And this is important because now the wrestlers have a new outlet through which kayfabe can be constructed. It is a completely new sphere that is disconnected from the world of professional wrestling. Now, how do wrestlers use this new sphere, this new realm, in order to engage with the audience? Well, they can simply propagate their kayfabe, use their persona, and display it to the world around them. They're not just confined to the ring. They're not just confined to the television screen. They can now post. They can now engage with the world as their persona. Now, an example that Grozev does highlight is, well, The Undertaker and his famous WrestleMania streak. The Undertaker, he won in 21 consecutive WrestleMania events. WrestleMania is the largest event that the WWE puts on as a paid live event. The Undertaker did win 21 times across 21 years until he lost to another wrestler, Brock Lesnar, in 2014. The outcome of this event was extremely shocking. It created waves all across social media. It essentially broke the internet. Now, why is this? Even though The Undertaker lost, why is this outcome important? Well, it is because The Undertaker already had an existing legacy. He was known for the streak. He was known as someone almost supernatural, someone who is almost undefeatable. So his defeat would obviously create this drama, this buzz, this tension all across social media. It almost solidified his legacy because the social media, it propagated this knowledge. It propagated knowledge of his streak and its breakage to the entire world, not just within professional wrestling. Like I said, to the entire world. This is how The Undertaker is almost immortalized, because he is now known across the world for his streak. Even though he directly did not interact with social media, it is the concepts that are associated with The Undertaker, him being the Phenom, the one with the streak. He is now known across the world, and that is the power of social media. Kayfabe can be propagated to the entire world by simply posting on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media platforms. Now, there is also another caveat with this advantage of social media being a platform to propagate kayfabe and the professional wrestling experience. The Undertaker was already established within the world of professional wrestling before he lost his streak. Modern wrestlers do not have this advantage because they're still developing their personas. They're still becoming up and coming within the world. So now instead of social media being this tool for propagation, it is another tool that they have to use in order to become more popular, in order to propagate their reputation and develop it. So Grozev, he does comment on this. He almost confirms what I just said a few seconds ago. He emphasizes that a wrestler, in order to maintain their kayfabe and their reputation, they must continue to display their kayfabe even if they're in a public setting. And it's broken as soon as the public knows who they are outside of their performances, outside of the ring. Grozev specifically puts it as, if you play a bad guy, this is a paraphrase by the way, but if you play a bad guy in the ring, the public, they don't expect you to post kittens on social media. It is completely unlike the persona, and thus consistency is important. So, Grozev, what he's trying to say here is, as audience interactivity is important in developing kayfabe, there is now an obligation for the wrestler to continue interacting in this new medium. It almost becomes a new sphere where the persona has to proliferate and become known to the world in order to gain the legacy where renowned the legacy of renowned wrestlers such as The Undertaker, John Cena, Randy Orton. So that is the caveat that Grozev is trying to explain to us that this media convergence has. But this is just one of the many problems that social media brings into the world of professional wrestling. There is a problem of the individual. For example, what if a wrestler wants to create a social media platform of just who they are as an individual, not who they are as a wrestler? If a fan finds out that The Undertaker is just Mark Calloway, who he is, by the way, and Mark Calloway just is completely different from who The Undertaker is, does that break the suspension of disbelief? Does that fan now not believe in The Undertaker anymore? So there is now the problem of a wrestler trying to balance their different personas, whether it be their real life persona or their wrestling persona. And it's not just a problem for the individuals as well. It can also be a problem for the company, the promotion. Let's say John Cena is now in a new movie, and he's bringing in aspects of his persona into Hollywood, into the movie. Now there is the problem of copyright. How much of this persona is owned by the promotion. Is the promotion owned by the individual, the promotion, and if this persona is presented in media other than the promotion where this wrestler is from, is that a copyright violation? So now, this can of worms that grows have opened by relating media conversions to social media is it creates so much complication for the argument that Reinhardt and Kroner were trying to develop, that it seems that we almost know nothing about media convergence within professional wrestling. We know, or we can infer, that it does help us with audience interactivity. We know that it is used to promote engagement from the audience, but with these new media, or with this new media, there's so much more that media convergence has to do with wrestling. So what can we ultimately take away from this engagement between these three different authors, presenting an evolution of professional wrestling and how it is presented to us? Well, there is not much that is concrete. As mentioned earlier, Grozev's article completely complicates the argument that Kroner developed, which also complicates the argument that Reinhardt developed. So it's just almost like a hierarchy, almost like a chain that keeps building on to this idea of media convergence, and is getting more complex and complex by the day because there's more media through which professional wrestling is seen through. So what can be ultimately taken away is that media convergence is integral to the form of professional wrestling because it becomes an outlet for wrestlers to display their performances and thus proliferate through the entire world, to propagate, to make the form known to the greater realm. And ultimately, we see professional wrestling also heavily referenced in the ultimate medium, which is real life, what we experience on a day-to-day, non-stop. Now, all this information that I just provided to you is daunting, to say the least. So let me dial it down and bring my arguments to a more tangible scale. Now, I'm part of FRS 165. That is a freshman seminar taught at Princeton University, and this class has to deal with professional wrestling in different contexts, such as a cultural context, political context, social context, and it is taught by Dr. Terry Babytooth Bull. Now, for our final project, my peers and I, we put on a simulated professional wrestling event. Each of us had our own personas that we developed ourselves. Now, my persona, the Skull Crusher, is heavily inspired by other media. He's inspired by the main antagonist of the video game Judgment. This antagonist is known as the Mole. He is a police officer who is secretly a serial killer, and they call him the Mole because he gouges out his victims' eyes, much as a mole would burrow through the ground or whatnot. Now, his characterization is was also an inspiration for the Skull Crushers, as they both have this twisted sense of justice. But this is not just about the Skull Crusher. This can go for any other or many other personas developed by my peers. We all created our entrances, our talking style based on other media that we engaged with, whether it be, like I said, movies, TV shows, other wrestling events, video games. And it goes to show just how integral media convergence is to the world of professional wrestling. And our event itself, it was inspired by these large-scale wrestling events that create an overarching storyline. We created matches that take inspiration from other matches from promotions such as the WWE. And like I said, media convergence is integral because we're always taking inspiration from other sources of media. And this is what increases viewership, because the audience is incentivized by engaging with these experiences that are familiar to them, experiencing fractions and aspects of media that they enjoy. And thus, that is why what can be ultimately said about professional wrestling as a site of media convergence is that it is integral to the form of professional wrestling, because it is what draws fans into this form of entertainment, and will continue to draw in fans as more and more media gets incorporated into the sphere of professional wrestling. So that is ultimately all I have to say regarding this topic. I know it was a lot. Thank you for sticking through my rambling and hopefully learning a thing or two about professional wrestling as a whole. And yeah, that is essentially all. Thank you so much for watching, and I will maybe see you again in the future. Take care.